Chapter 13. Nicholas Flamel. Dumbledore had convinced Harry not to go looking for the Mirror of Erised again, and for the rest of the Christmas holidays the invisible cloak stayed folded at the bottom of his trunk. Harry wished he could forget what he'd seen in the mirror as easily, but he couldn't. He started having nightmares. Over and over again he dreamed about his parents disappearing in a flash of green light, while a high voice cackled with laughter. "You see, Dumbledore was right. That mirror could drive you mad," said Ron when Harry told him about these dreams. Hermione, who came back the day before term started, took a different view of things. She was torn between horror at the idea of Harry being out of bed, roaming the schools 3 nights in a row, if Filch had caught you, and disappointment that he hadn't at least found out who Nicholas Flamel was. They had almost given up hope of ever finding Flamel in a library book, even though Harry was sure he'd read the name somewhere. Once term had started, they were back to skimming through books for 10 minutes during their breaks. Harry even had less time than the other two because Quidditch practice had started again. Wood was working the team harder than ever. Even the endless rain that had replaced the snow couldn't dampen his spirits. The Weasleys complained that Wood was becoming a fanatic, but Harry was on Wood's side. If they won their next match against Hufflepuff, they would overtake Slytherin in the house championship for the first time in 7 years. Quite apart from wanting to win, Harry found that he had fewer nightmares when he was tired out after training. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave them a bit of bad news. He'd just gotten very angry with the Weasleys, who kept dive-bombing each other and pretending to fall off their brooms. "Will you stop messing around?" he yelled. "That's exactly the sort of thing that'll lose us the match. Snape's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor." George Weasley really did fall off his broom at these words. "Snape's refereeing?" He spluttered through a mouthful of mud. "Whenever he's refereed a Quidditch match, he's not going to be fair if he might overtake Slytherin." The rest of the team lived next to George. They complained too. "It's not my fault," said Wood. "We've just got to make sure we can play a clean game, so Snape hasn't got any excuse to pick on us." Which was all very well, thought Harry, but he had another reason for not wanting Snape near him while he was playing Quidditch. The rest of the team hung back from one another, as usual at the end of practice, but Harry headed straight back for the Gryffindor common room. He found Ron and Hermione playing chess. Chess was the only thing Hermione had ever lost at, something Harry and Ron thought was very good for her. "Don't talk to me for a moment," said Ron when Harry sat down next to him. "I need to concentrate." He caught sight of Harry's face. "What's the matter with you? You look terrible." Speaking quietly so that no one else would hear, Harry told the other two about Snape's sudden sinister desire to be a Quidditch referee. "Don't play," said Hermione at once. "Say that you're ill," said Ron. "Pretend to break your leg." "Really break your leg?" said Ron. "I can't," said Harry. "There isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all." At that moment, Neville toppled into the common room. How he had managed to climb through the portrait hole wasn't anyone's guess, because his legs had been stuck together with what they recognized at once as the leg-longer curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell over laughing, except for Hermione, who leapt up and performed the counter curse. Neville's legs sprang apart, and he got to his feet calmly. "What happened?" Hermione asked him, leading him over to sit with Harry and Ron. "Malfoy," said Neville shakily. "I met him outside the library. He said he'd be looking for someone to practice that on." "Go to Professor McGonagall," Hermione urged Neville. "Report him." Neville shook his head. "I don't want any more trouble," he mumbled. "Gotta stand up to him," Neville said. "Ron, he's used to walking he's walking all over people. But that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me that I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that," Neville choked out. Harry felt in the pocket of his robes and pulled out a chocolate frog, the very last one from a box Hermione had given him for Christmas. He gave it to Neville. It looked as though he might cry. "You're worth 12 of Malfoy," Harry said. "The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin." Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile as he unwrapped the frog. "Thanks, Harry. I think I'll go to bed. Do you want the card? You collect them, don't you?" Neville walked away. Harry looked at the famous wizard card. Dumbledore again. He was the first one I ever... He gasped. He stared at the back of the card, and then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. "I found him," he whispered. "I found Flamel. I told you I'd read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel." Hermione jumped to her feet. She hadn't looked so excited since they'd gotten back their marks for the very first piece of homework. "Stay there," she said, and she sprinted up the stairs to the girls' dormitories. Harry and Ron barely had time to exchange mystified looks before she was dashing back, an enormous old book in her hands. "I never thought to look in here," she whispered excitedly. "I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading." Light, said Ron, but Hermione told him to be quiet until she looked something up, started frigging frantically through the pages, muttering to herself. At last she found what she was looking for. I knew it. I knew it. Are we allowed to speak yet? Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. Nicholas Flamel, she whispered dramatically, is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. It didn't have quite the effect she'd expected. The what? Said Harry and Ron. Oh, honestly, I don't know. Don't you two read? Look, read that there. She pushed the book towards them. Harry and Ron read. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Sorcerer's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belonged to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, chose quite a life in Devon with his wife perennial, 658. See, said Hermione when Harry and Ron had finished, the dog must be guarding Flamel's Sorcerer's Stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him because they're friends and he knows someone was after it. That's why he wanted the stone moved out of Gringotts. Stone that makes gold and stops you from ever dying, said Harry. No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it. And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in that study of recent developments in wizardry. It's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he? The next morning, Defense Against the Dark Arts, while copying down different ways of treating werewolf fights, Harry and Ron were still discussing what they'd do with the Sorcerer's Stone if they had one. It wasn't until Ron had said he'd buy his own Quidditch team that Harry remembered about Snape and the coming match. I'm going to play, told Ron and Hermione. If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their faces if we win. Just as long as we're not wiping you off the field, said Hermione. As the match drew nearer, however, Harry became more and more nervous about what he told Ron and Hermione. The rest of the team wasn't too calm either. The idea of overtaking Slytherin in the House Championship was wonderful. No one had done it for several years. But would they be allowed to with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went. At times he even wondered where Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potions lessons were turning into a sort of a weekly torture. Snape was so horrible to Harry. Could Snape possibly know they found out about the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry didn't see how he could, yet sometimes he had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. Harry knew when they wished him good luck outside their locker rooms after the next afternoon that Ron and Hermione were wondering whether they'd ever see him alive again. This wasn't what you'd call comforting. Harry hardly heard a word of Whit's pep talk as he pulled down his Quidditch robe and picked up the Nimbus 2000. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found places in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand why they looked so grim and worried, for they had both brought their wands to match. Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had been secretly practicing the leg locker curse. They got the idea from Malfoy using it on Neville and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any sign of wanting Malfoy. Now don't forget, it's Locomotor Mortis, Hermione muttered as Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve. I know, Ron said. Don't nag. Back in the locker room, Wood had taken Harry aside. I don't want to pressure you, Potter, but if we ever need an early capture of the snitch, it's now. Finish the game before Snape can favor Hufflepuff too much. The whole school's out there, said Fred, peering out of the door. Even Blimey, Dumbledore's come to watch. Harry's heart did a somersault. Dumbledore, he said, dashing to the door to make sure. Fred was right. There was no mistaking his silver beard. Harry could have laughed out loud with relief. He was safe. There was simply no way that Snape would dare try to hurt him if Dumbledore was watching. Perhaps that was why Snape wasn't looking so angry as the teams marched onto the field. Something Ron noticed too. I've never seen Snape look so mean, he told Hermione. Look, they're off. Ouch! Someone had poked Ron in the back of the head. It was Malfoy. Oh, sorry, Weasley. Didn't see you there. Malfoy grinned broadly at Crabbe and Goyle. Wonder how long Potter's going to stay in his brain this time. And it would have been, what about you, Weasley? Ron didn't answer. Snape had just awarded Hufflepuff a penalty because George Weasley had hit a bludger at him. Hermione, who had all her fingers crossed in her lap, was squinting fixedly at Harry, was circling the game like a hawk, looking for the snitch. You know how I think they'd choose people for Gryffindor team? Said Malfoy loudly for a few minutes later, for Snape awarded Hufflepuff another penalty for no reason at all. It's people they feel sorry for. See, there's Potter, who's got no parents, and then there's Weasley, who's got no money. You should be on the other team, Longbottom. You've got no brains. Neville went bright red, but turned his seat to face Malfoy. I'm worth 12 of you, Malfoy, he stammered. Crabbe and Goyle howled with laughter, but Ron, still not daring to take his eyes off the game, he said. You tell him, Neville. Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley, and that's saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point. Anxiety about Harry. I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word and Ron! Harry! What? Where? Harry had suddenly gone to a spectacular dive, which drew gasping cheers from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her crossed fingers in her mouth, as Harry streaked towards the ground like a bullet. You're in luck, Weasley. Potter's obviously spotted some money in the ground, said Malfoy. Ron snapped before Malfoy knew what was happening. Ron was on top of him, wrestling to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of the seat top. Come on, Harry, Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch Harry speed straight at Snape. She didn't even notice Malfoy and Ron rolling around under her seat, or the scuffles and yelps coming from the whirl fist that was Neville, Crabbe, and Goyle. Up in the air, Snape turned on his broomstick just in time to see something scarlet shoot past him, missing him by inches the next second. Harry had pulled out of the dive, his arm raised in triumph, the snitch clasped in his hand. The stands erupted. It had to be a record. No one could ever remember the snitch being caught so quickly. Ron, where are you? The game's over. Harry's won. We won. Gryffindor's in the lead, shrieked Hermione, dancing up and down in her seat and hugging her batty pateel of the row in front. Harry jumped off his broom, a foot from the ground. He couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over, and he'd barely lasted 5 minutes. As Gryffindors came spilling onto the field, he saw Snape land nearby, white-faced, tight-lipped, and then Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to Dumbledore's smiling face. Well done, said Dumbledore quietly so that only Harry could hear. Nice to see you haven't been brooding about that mirror. Been keeping busy. Excellent. Snape spat bitterly on the ground.